Okay, with Andrew Gladman, The Dying Night is a short film played at the Fantasy Sci-Fi Festival, but this is really a fantasy film. Pretty inventive on your part. You wrote the script too, right?
Yes, that's right.
So where did this idea come from for you? This like night and then kind of like this whole new fantasy world. That of course there's a quest in it, and what's his faith? Like all these spirituality elements in the film. Like where did this idea come for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it started really as just a bit of an experiment and a challenge to myself. In that I'd recently started reading Joseph Campbell, who came up with sort of the idea of what we
Hero's
now know as the
journey.
hero's
Yeah.
journey, exactly. And a lot of his ideas about mythology, and that was getting me really interested in it um, as a sort of area to write within. And so I said, right, the first thing I want to do is just see if I can write a standard myth that kind of follows the traditional sort of structures and ideas of mythology, and do that in as a story that takes about 10 minutes. So I failed on that front because it turned out to be about 22 minutes long, um, from a 12-page script. But it was, yeah, it was just sort of a script I wrote as like a challenge to myself. And then it sat untouched for a little while, until a couple of friends of mine, who were also in the filmmaking world, um, had a bit of interest in working on some new projects. I thought, oh, I'll ask if they'd like to take a look at this script, see what they think of it, and it just sort of started to snowball from there. We ended up going ahead and launching it into a full project.
And what's your
Uh,
experience making films, like filmmaking, like directing?
so I've started like very young, making little crappy kind of fan films on YouTube, just with friends, like short 5-10 minute films that we shot
Yeah.
with, I think, yeah, a camera that could shoot about 30 seconds of footage at a time at first, and we go and upload it and then film more stuff. And that just evolved and evolved and evolved. And then, in 20, I think it's 2019, I started on my first sort of proper short film, um, with a group of people I'd met through a sort of 2-week filmmaking course. And a bunch of us said, let's stay in touch. Let's go and work on some new projects together. And I created this sci-fi film called The Mechanical, um, which was a little bit sort of Black Mirror-ish. And so we just sort of off our own backs went and did that. Launched a little crowdfunding campaign that helped fund some of it. Um, and yeah, that was about a 10-minute film that we released just after the pandemic, and took to a few festivals. And then, yeah, I've since moved to Norwich, where I'm based now, and that sort of introduced me to a whole new filmmaking community, that led to The Dying Night.
So this is a pretty ambitious film in terms of like kind of the new reality that you kind of created. I'm assuming you used some stuff in post production, but also like it's some really great cinematography, a lot of performances. So tell me about like kind of producing this film and kind of like what was your first step? Like finding the locations first, finding the cast. Like what was your process putting it together?
Um, so the first thing that was really helpful was just finding a producer. So my friend Sammy, who
There you
produced
go.
it,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, he came on board and he had some ideas on cast and on how he sort of go about that process.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it was sort of finding the right people first. So, Chris Sainton Clark, who plays the knight, who's just an incredible talent. Sammy had recommended him and said, I think he's got the look of a knight. He's
Yeah.
gone and done these one-man plays that have got all these accolades at various festivals. So he came highly recommended. And as soon as I saw him, I thought, yeah, that's our knight right there. Um, and then, yeah, costume was an important thing early on as well. We were sort of, that's obviously, I think, really important in creating that immersion in the world and just getting the
Yeah.
tone right. I think it would have been very easy to go a little too silly and cheesy looking with something like this, where you're aiming for a medieval sort of look. But it had to be sort of stylized. It's not necessarily set in a specific real world era. It's kind of drawing on a more of a storybook look. And I knew I didn't want a knight in full armor, sort of clunking around the place. I liked the more sort of streamlined, minimal look that we went with. Um, so yeah, we found Izzy, who was an amazing costume designer on this, who'd done a few stage productions before. And I worked very closely with her on sort of deciding things like what the night's look should be. As we got the character of Death in the film, it was almost a traditional Grim Reaper, but we spent a lot of time talking about what we wanted the face of Death to look like. We found this mask and just sort of added these teardrops to it. And I thought just created something that was, it's reminiscent of sort of classical iconography around death, but it's distinct enough that it doesn't feel like it's just a costume you've seen before. Um, and then, yeah, and then early on, it was sort of looking at the locations as well, which were obviously a huge part of building this world and making it feel real and making it sort of making it align with the story and the vision we had for this. Um, and so yeah, that was a lot of sort of just looking around different bits of woodland and seeing will this work. A lot of bridges we were looking at for death. And does this bridge give us enough space? Does it look medieval enough? Does it have the right sort of environment around it? Um, and luckily where we are, there's a few like little ruins and stuff about. So the start and end of the film are in this old ruin, which
Yeah,
became a
where
night
was that shot?
film. That's out in a place called Great Yarmouth, and it's I believe it's called Saint Benet's Abbey, and it's the only abbey that wasn't sort of decommissioned by Henry VIII and has been in use for thousands of years, well, hundreds of years, sorry.
Yeah.
And I think they have one service there a year still to this day. They have like in just sort of the outdoor parts of the ruins. Um, but we found that and it just again looked perfect. There's that sort of round house in the middle of it where we could film the actual interior scenes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and these stunning ruins on the outside that gave us the great shots of the night sort of walking away. But again, it was a nightmare to film in because it proved very popular with tourists and it was by no means shut down for us or anything.
Oh
So we
yeah,
had,
gotcha. You kind of like kind of stole the shots, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stopping and starting. And yeah, we had a whole tour group turn up and walk in. We had a group of guys who apparently come there once a year to sing like an opera song together, which was a bit bizarre. And it just happened to fall on the one day a year we were filming there. So
Yeah.
that was an interesting experience, but worth it for the shots we got out of it, definitely.
So where did you? How was the for the you mentioned the character of Death, I guess. Kind of like I'm not giving anything away. Kind of shows up, 10 minutes in. Uh, where that's a it looks so cool. How the costume design, the face. Where how did you kind of create that?
Um, so yeah, again, as I say, this is something we talked a lot about in the early sort of costume design meetings.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted it to have that look of kind of a traditional Grim Reaper, but just removed enough to feel like its own design. And so we talked a lot about layering up all these cloaks and things. So we have sort of a shawl and a hooded cloak, and then there's like I don't know what it is, but it's some amazing material that our costume designer found that looks almost like a cobweb that's kind of around the middle of death and just sort of helps separate out some of the cloaks and gives it again this sort of
Yeah.
weird, yeah, deathly, old aged look. And then the mask, I think, just came out of a craft shop, and it was just had this slightly off-white crackled texture, and I just said that
Yeah.
looks perfect already as it is. We just added these teardrops to it, sort of running down the face. I like that idea of having something that kind of represented grief in there, um, and and then yeah, we put it all together, and it was absolutely terrifying to work with on set. We looked at sort of the finished thing all put together, and it's just a bit blimey, that is genuinely terrifying.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's nicely shot too. Like with the
Mm.
I don't know, you guys. It looks like you shot at like dusk, I guess, but it's sort of like it's a really nice kind of lighting on the faces. It's just nicely done.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I think the sort of dusky look is just through careful color grading. That was sort of we were shooting
Gotcha.
through the afternoon, I think. It was a very rainy day though, so that played
You don't see
into
it though
the
a lot, right?
atmosphere
Yeah.
of the bit. Yeah, um, yeah, and then we were careful with that as well to sort of in post just have the color drop in that scene, so you really get that sense of this is a lifeless sort of realm that we have now entered.
Yeah. So would it working with your cinematographer? Did you like storyboard everything? Did you like how was setting up all the shots?
We didn't storyboard, but we had a sort of thorough shot list that we sometimes stuck to, and sometimes you get on location and you see something and go, "Oh,
Yeah.
that looks amazing. We'll add that shot in." Um, yeah, our cinematographer Tristan is incredible at what he does. He's just directed his first short film as well, which was an absolute masterpiece called After the Light. Um, but working with him on this was great. I think he was probably the crew member I was sort of working closest with every day, and we
Sure.
just
Yeah.
sort of from the outset be how do we shoot this to make it look as good as possible, and he'd have all kinds of wild and wonderful ideas. And anytime there was somewhere high, he could go and run off and climb up before I could say anything to stop him or think about health and safety. He was up there with the camera, getting these amazing some of the wide shots you see in the forest scenes. He had just gone and found these little ridges he could climb out onto and get these big overhead shots. But even down to like the little sort of B-roll bits of little close-ups of leaves and things just looked gorgeous the way he shot them.
Yeah, it's a really nicely photographed film. Like it brings the reality to it, right? So to the film, right? So
Yeah, that is.
and it's a pretty big cast as well. Like it's like there's a lot of the beginning scene, and then you got the after the death scene, I guess.
Yeah, it was. And a lot of cast who sort of never cross paths because obviously we're following the night throughout, and he just has all these little sort of separate meetings with everyone. Um, but yeah, it was great to sort of have a range of people we got to work with throughout. We have the dying people who are sort of tied up to trees outside the
Yeah,
adversary's territory. My wife's one of them. Um, we had Rosie, who's one of the healers at the start I'd worked with on the mechanical, and it's just an incredible actress, and it was great to sort of get to bring her back for a second project. Um, in Death actually was two actors because we were like, we need someone who's going to tower over or at least be the same height as the knight
yeah,
on set. But then we decided we really liked the idea of a female voice for Death. And so Nora Bindi, who provides the voice, came up with just that incredible sound, and she came up with this sort of echoey sound for Death as well. So when she sent in her audition tape, she had recorded herself reading the lines and then gone back over it and recorded all these little whispers over the top that just made it really ethereal and otherworldly. And so we took that same idea and used it in the finished product. Um, but she's a shorter actress. And I was like, this isn't going to work with our 6 foot knight.
yeah.
So we have a male actor, Corey Nurse, who actually played Death on set and did a wonderful job considering he was pretty much blind and in a costume that stopped him from walking very easily throughout the day.
Did you shoot in a real church as well?
Yes, yeah. The sword fight scene.
Yeah.
We've found a guy, Lee, who provided the sword we had throughout the film. And then he plays the adversary when he's in the full armor in that scene. And he was originally just going to be our sort of sword fight coach. We were going to have another actor play the adversary, and then it didn't work out, and so he stepped in. Um, but we went to sort of rehearse the sword fight, and he runs this like sword fighting school locally out of this old church where I live here. Norwich is there's I think it's got the most churches of sort of anywhere in England. All these old medieval churches,
Yeah.
most of which have been sort of decommissioned or turned into other things. Um, so yeah, he runs this sword fighting school out of this one, and we were rehearsing the fight, and I was just looking around, going, "This would be a really cool location to use in the actual film."
Yeah.
Because originally it was going to be sort of outside somewhere in another sort of little ruin, but it was just so stunning in there. I thought we can make this work. It's a very minor sort of rewrite to have the knight just walk into a church that's in these woods. Um, and so that was what we did, and it yeah looked absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's cool. And so and he did the choreography for the sword fight.
Yes, yeah. So like I say, he runs this sort of sword fighting
Yeah,
school anyway here, and
that's
yeah,
the
so
thing, I guess, right? Is it for actors or like sword fighting
no,
school?
just as a sort of I guess for hobbyists.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was great because then we got to talk to him about he sort of designed a lot of the sword fights. I said like I'd liked the idea of using real sword fighting techniques, and I wanted it to be a bit aggressive and messy at times, and not too much like a uh, polished sort of swashbuckling sword fight. And so Lee immediately had all these ideas of, oh, this would be a really cool thing to do, and like the certain moves that you don't see often in films. So there's a bit where Chris picks up the sword from the blade and uses
Yeah,
the hilt as sort of a bludgeoning weapon, which was a real technique that we used in medieval sword fighting sometimes. And yeah, it looks incredible there. But practicing the fight was interesting because we got there and had Chris sort of ready to go and rehearse it. And the first thing Lee said is, "Okay, Andy, why don't you hop in for a bit and do some of this fighting with Chris?" I'm the director. I'm not ready to sword fight here. But
yeah,
he got me to have a go, and yeah, that was good fun. And then yeah,
cool.
the two of them sort of figured out this whole sequence for the sword fight that's in the film.
But you mentioned in like post production, like it seems like you did a lot of color grading in post production to get the right kind of look the whole time.
Yeah, so it was really sort of throughout the film we had to think about what was going on with color and how it was
Yeah,
changing, moving. Early on, we had it's very luscious and green when the knight first is talking to like the forest spirits that he kind of encounters on the first part of his journey, and then
yeah,
obviously we go to death, and we wanted it to be a lot grayer and bleaker. And then the sword fight again, it becomes quite sort of grey and bleak, just to capture the harshness of that moment. But yeah, really throughout, there's a lot of fluctuating from very vibrant to very washed out, depending on sort
yeah,
of where we are in the knight's journey.
yeah. It looks great. So I'm assuming you've been told asked this before, but is there a bigger story here? Is there a feature film in the works here?
Um, there are some plans to do more with this sort of story world. I've been in the early stages of writing a follow up to this particular film, but in the long term, there's potentially a sort of feature film plan that I think this will serve as a bit of a proof of concept for.
Yeah, totally. So there is one. There is a feature film here, like the script already done.
A version of the script already done, being revised. It's not exactly a adaptation of this, but it's kind of again, it's very concerned with mythology, and it's thematically very similar to this and tonally very
Gotcha.
similar to The Dying Night. So yeah, this I think was just a bit of an experiment in that world and in sort of telling a story of this kind.
Well, congratulations. I'm assuming the budget you wrote down, I won't say what it is on Film Freeway is true. So you really got, you really made an excellent short film on a very limited budget. This like fantasies are not easy to do, right? So like,
Yeah,
so
thank
hopefully
you.
you and your team are proud of yourselves.
Very much so. I'm very, very honoured to have won Best Fantasy at the festival.
Yeah. So your company is so you got a company going right now like Final Frame Cinema
Yes, yeah, that's sort of my production label.
production label. So you get to make more films.
Yeah, we've got some more plans in the works. Nothing started yet. I'm actually working on a play at the moment, a sort of comedy play, so wildly different to what I've just done here.
Oh,
But
good. Yeah.
beyond that, the hope is to get back into another film project pretty quickly.
Yeah, you should keep going. All right. Well, congratulations on the film. Like I said, nicely executed film on all the regards. So
Thank you so much, and
yeah.
thank you
And
for talking to me. It's been great.
Andrew Gladman, very positive name. Glad. I'm sure you've been told that before as well, right?
Many times, yeah.
I'm glad, man. Yeah. I'm doing what everybody else does, but I just like the last name. So,
Thank you. Yeah,
all right, let's talk again when you make your next film.
Absolutely. Thanks for
All right.
having me.